Welcome everybody. Talking is hard, and this is my third take. Let's get started here. What is this? What are we doing? What I want to try to focus on is basically why I love this game so much and fill others in on my thought processes and maybe help them along the way. So what is this series going to be? What is this episode going to be? This is basically going to be setting up the entire series in the future, and maybe I'll dive off deeper into some of these individual topics. Well, you still don't know what I'm talking about. This is why this is like the third or fourth take now. So what is this? This is good. Okay, you know what? Let's look at my notes. I write better than I talk. Well, you'll be the judge of that. So this is going to be like a detailed meta-analysis, not this episode, but the series is going to be a detailed meta-analysis of different revenue sources compared to each other. This is not going to be a detailed micro-analysis within each group. So, for example, what are we talking about? What does this really mean? Let's mash buttons so that you do the unexpected. Let's change over to here. So this is the spreadsheet that I did for figuring out whether pigs are profitable, I guess I should backtrack one step further. This is going to be for seasons. This is focused on seasons because without seasons, basically everything's related to how fast you can do them, and you're heavily rewarded for buying bigger equipment so you can essentially reset fields faster and make profits quicker, right? It's not farming. Farming is about getting revenue over a fixed period of time, and that's typically set over a year, right? How much can you make in a year? I mean, that's kind of what life is, most jobs, etc. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is this episode is basically going to be setting up some rough expectations so that I don't have to spend 30 minutes in every single individual episode. So say I was talking about cows, like, and, be aware of this disclaimer, be aware of this disclaimer, this was on this setting with, so basically that's the idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I'll probably, I don't know, I might not make it prettier than this. I just might tell you the end results and show you my cheat sheet that I used for coming up with all this stuff. But what it's basically going to be is me analyzing, for example, cows. What type of cow is more profitable than the others? This is the raw data. I deleted the statistics part, but anyway, in each episode, I'll basically say, hey, this is how much money you can make with cows over a given year. This is how much money you can make over 5 years with X given starting points. And so what are those starting points? That's the whole point of this initial episode. Where are we starting from? Right? Because if you start with different, you have to have a standard. It's not like Giants where we have multiple standards. Just kidding. Kind of, not really, but okay. And ignoring that comment, we're gonna be moving, just glossing over that. So that's kind of the rough idea of what you can expect through this series. And let's just talk about with seasons. I expect to basically start with a hard economic difficulty, but with $1.25 million. That is farm manager mode. That's your farm manager starting money with hard economic difficulty. And I do that just because, well, it should be easy enough for you to know, okay, if I'm playing on medium, I'll double my profits. If I'm playing on easy, quadruple my profits. That's roughly how the numbers come out on that. So I really like the idea of starting from scratch, but 500K is just not enough money. So we're going to start with 1.25 million as a rough estimate. You know what I might do? That's where most of this is going to be broken off of. I might do, after I do all these categories, right? The results could very well change if you only have 500,000. So if you like starting from scratch, what's the best way to start? That can be a detailed episode by itself. But normally, I don't feel like that's how most people play. So that's not certainly how we play. We typically start in the $1 million to $2 million range of starting money on our competitive servers and our cooperative servers. So that's kind of where we're starting at from a starting point. And then, like I said, I'll address the start from scratch mode with only 500K later as a separate episode. But I'm just I'm just stating basically what you can expect with each comparison in general. Anyway, I'll highlight these with each individual episode as well, but this is more just, it's like a tabletop discussion of what's going to happen and what's going on. The goal with each episode is basically to look at an aspect of the game, you know what, I should just read from my notes, and then I would be much more coherent on the actual recording. So the goal with each normal episode is to look at an individual aspect of the game, and break it down how much money you can make compared to other revenue streams. So it's going to be kind of hard to start because we don't have anything to go from. The first episode in this series is probably going to be crops. That's the most generic thing. That's what most people do, even if it's not necessarily the most profitable, because it is a farming game. There is a lot of things to consider. These are just going to be rough estimates to give you an idea of the viability of each profit line. And for that, I mean, well, for example, in my cow example, okay, so here's what this series is. I'm going to tell you roughly, hey, cows are more profitable than sheep, but they require more time. Something like that. And I'll show you the rough numbers. But what I'm not going to do is, for example, this was based off of investing $500,000 of cows. And you start with $500,000 of cows invested, I think. I can't remember my starting requirements. That's why I'm going to redo all these. Also, your feeding requirements change with cows. So that'll change things as well. But again, so what I'll tell you is, this is roughly how profitable cows are if you start with $500,000 invested in the head alone. Right there. I will tell you the results based off one example. Like, not necessarily this example, but something like this. What I won't cover is, I won't go into detail. Okay, well, what if you reinvest your profits from farming, arable land, into buying more cattle early? What if you, these are your meat production. This is buying the same amount of cows every single time. This is their actual weights, right? So this is selling and then rebuying what their profits are over 5 years. That's what I did this out to. This is an earlier revision. I didn't want to spoil the results. But anyway, also the results changed because Seasons has changed, which is another disclaimer. So my data is good for now. Season is technically still, it's released on PC, but it's kind of in development. They're working out kinks. They have actually changed your profit margins for animals at least one time significantly. So you kind of have to take that into account. But again, this video is just horrible. Well, let's just not cut that out because I don't want to redo it all. Anyway, I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. I'm going to show you a couple case studies, and then I will give you the results, and I will encourage you to think for yourself, how can I make this more viable? How can I make it more profitable? I might provide some examples where things might change if you do this. Case in point, like I said, each time I bought the meat, the sailor cows, and then I sold them, I rebought the same amount. What if, for example, you repurchased reinvested your profit basically in a larger herd size? How could that change things for you? Then they might be even more profitable than dairy cows. So stuff like that, I can't do. There's thousands of different choices you can make in this game. I can't cover every single individual circumstance. What if you have bigger equipment versus smaller equipment? That could allow you to buy more livestock. There's so many different variations that it's just no way for me to cover them all. Also, I like a little bit of the mystery left out there for you to discover yourself. I think that's one of the most fun things in the game, and if I just did everything for you, then, I wouldn't want somebody else to do that for me, because this is my favorite part about the game. This is my passion. I like knowing the optimal route to take. Even if I don't normally take it myself, I like knowing what it is. And this will hopefully help, but it will not cover everything. It's, like I said, it's impossible for me to cover everything. Also, something else to consider is that each map maker really sets things up differently. There are scripts that actually change the pricing value of grains on the server itself, or your map. So if you have a script that changes these pricings on the actual tables in the game script itself, that could be a variation, although I don't think most mods do things that way. For example, Seasons takes the price from those tables in the game code, and they modify them based on what it is over an annual range. So for example, if you actually look at the Seasons code, let's go into there real quick. And geos can change this too. That's why I'm covering this, because a geo can change any one of these individual things. So if you go into a geo and you look and you see, nope, that's the wrong one, economy. And you see this, for example, this can change wheat. So the most you can sell wheat for is 21% over the base value. These are a factor of the base value, right? So 1.0 is the base price. Obviously, the game will do its own thing and basically vary that price for wheat within itself, right? Like these are all probably scaled a factor of 1.0, but the game floats up and down automatically within a given range. Also, like I said, Seasons changes that raise. Something else that could possibly change, and this is why I just can't cover everything because it depends on your map, really. If you go into your map itself, oops, wrong one. Let's go to placeables, map US, and selling station generic. Now, these might all be different. I think the base game, they're all the same. But let's look at these. For example, price scale 1.0. So that's for that sell point. That's for this one. That's for this one. That's for this one. Now let's look at a mod map for the server that we are thinking about doing. I don't have that one on my computer. Let's look at Marwell Manor Farm real quick. I believe that this one is also different. If you look at sell points, and then we will do selling station port. Let's open those bad boys up. Looks like he did price scale 1. Oh, okay, so this one has eggs at 1.1. It looks like everything else is 1. But anyway, if you look at the map that we're switching to, some of them are 1.6. Some of them are 0.8. So it really depends on what your map maker set these up as, which you might not even see because you don't see this side of it. All you see is the price in game. And if that's 90% lower, you might not notice that from game to game, but it will change your profits. So all I can really do is cover the basics. You know, if you combine the prices, the price scale, it depends on how much they change them, obviously. But if you look at different price scales, typically they change no more than 1.6, I think, is typically what I mostly see, down to 0.8. I haven't seen much of these above 1.5 in different maps, but this is something you can check yourself in whatever map you're playing on. Also, something that changed, like I said, Seasons changes itself based on the course of the season. So just Seasons alone changes them by up to a factor of 1.6, 1.7. So it can be like a 70% price difference on your profit margins for crops. I mean, that's just vanilla Seasons. You know, that's not even a geo or a map maker making any changes. So there's a lot of different what I'm trying to get at, the point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of different factors, and there's no way for me to cover them all, even if I wanted to. Like I said, for reasons earlier, I'm not going to cover every single example. Something else to talk about is forestry. Forestry is an interesting topic because if you think about, let's look at this. I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning. If you think about the course of a year, almost all of your profits are based on a fixed value. What do I mean by that? It's kind of zero sum in that, not against player versus player, right? Zero sum, if you're unfamiliar, is basically in order to do something, you take away from something else, right? So there's some games where they are purely, especially board games, they are purely zero sum. A lot of railroad board games are made this way, where in order for you to make money, someone else has to be losing money. That's a zero sum economy, right? But In this world, the amount of money that I make in the game is not necessarily dependent or hurting anybody else in the game. However, if you consider a field, if you consider most operations, it's taking away from doing something else. For example, crops are zero sum within themselves, because for you to plant corn, that means you're not planting any other crop over that given acreage that you planted corn, right? Obviously, it's kind of an obvious example, but my point is that your max amount of profit is pretty much set in stone. And by that I mean it's set in stone over a given year. And this is why we're only doing this for seasons, because in the base game, again, I kind of touched on this earlier, it's you want to do things as fast as possible. That's how you make the most income. In seasons, that's not necessarily true. Say you plant corn over a hectare, right? Now, if you plant corn over a hectare, how much time are you investing in order to plant that, right? How much time are you wasting because you have smaller equipment, where if you had bigger equipment, you might be able to spend more time taking care of your animals, taking care of something else, logging, anything else. Completing a contract on the server, making extra income on the side, right? So there's different factors in there that you have to consider, but the bottom line is your max amount of profit is pretty much set in stone in this game. You can only gross X amount of dollars with corn over a hectare in the game, and that's it. That's not, it'll change a little bit based on fertilization, right? So, but there is a ceiling. There's a point where you cannot make anything more. So if you hire out help, if you buy bigger equipment than you should be buying, that takes away from your profit margin. That means that's a lot more overhead that you are spending on equipment. Yeah, you're getting through the fields faster, and yeah, at a certain point, you need to have bigger equipment so that you can farm more ground, right? That's kind of the scale. But anyway, where was I going with this? Let me check my notes to get me back on track. Yeah, I was talking about logging, right? Logging is kind of an exception to this rule. Most of the things in the game are this way. However, with logging, that's not necessarily true, because you can just buy another forest. You can, in general, you have more lumber on a map. Now, some maps aren't made this way, but in general, you have more lumber and trees on a map than you could ever really realistically consume for what most people like to play the game. So logging is kind of an interesting thing, because it's not there isn't a fixed ceiling. I guess there is a fixed ceiling, but it's fixed so high that most people will never really reach it on a given map or in a given year, right? So I guess if we're comparing everything towards monetary value, you have to consider, maybe I should buy bigger equipment because that allow me to get things done faster, and then I can log or do contracts, I mean, there has to be some comparison there, but logging is kind of a freak, because then there's also this consideration, right? Like, the more equipment you buy, the faster you can do things. This is a 10,000 operating, 9,000, say 10,000 operating fee per hour. When we were logging on Gieselberg, it was we made roughly $25,000 per hour logging. And we were logging with log forks and a front loader and a chainsaw, and we had the logging winch, which I don't think I have it enabled. But that's not a lot of equipment. That's not a lot of overhead. And we were still making $20,000 to $25,000 per hour. That was with two people, though. That was with my farming partner chopping down a bunch of the trees and stripping them clean and cutting them to size. All I had to do is load them up and deliver them. But with us two together, we were making $26,000 an hour. So I guess, I don't know, how do you compare that to buying a different size tractor so that you can save more time, so that you can spend more time logging? I don't know. We'll cover that a little bit more in a separate episode for the crops. I'll analyze, like, with 6 meters, with 6 meter equipment, it takes X long to get through a field. With this size equipment, it takes you this long to get through the field. We'll cover that more in depth on the arable episode, but really, logging is kind of a weird thing to compare to with crops because, like I said, most people won't be able to reach that ceiling of your max income on a server. So I don't really know what to do. I mean, I don't really know what to do with that information. I guess we can use that as a baseline. For example, if I invested X amount of time, cultivating, spraying a field, and I only got $50,000 a year, but I spent 50 hours doing that, how much money would I have gotten if I was logging, right? I mean, but then again, a lot of people don't like to log, so it doesn't matter how much you could have made logging anyway, because they're just not going to log. So I really hesitate to compare everything to logging, because for most people, it doesn't really matter anyway. And I haven't really done the numbers myself. I don't know if time invested in logging is more or less profitable than something like animals. I have suspicions. I have very strong suspicions, but I don't know without looking at the data. So that's kind of the stuff that we're going to be figuring out. I think probably because it is a factor, it does exist on the map. We'll probably mention compared to logging, but I probably won't go into too much more detail than that. I know, so if it was just one person doing that with very minimal investment, other than buying the land of the forest itself, you could make roughly, let's say 10 to 12, let's just say 10,000, roughly 10,000 per hour, right? That's roughly what you can make logging by yourself. So anyway, I don't know if we'll compare that. I don't know. I don't really know where this series is going. But the first episode we're going to do is probably talking about arable crops. I will probably do more testing as far as I'm not really sure where it'll go. But we're going to look at arable crops next, right? So I will see you guys later. I hope that you are looking forward to this series. I know I really am, but this kind of gives you a taste of what you're going to be able to expect and what you're going to get out of this, right? This is, stuff like this. This is what I hope that you'll be getting out of this. Obviously, I'll fix it up a little bit more again, and don't try to pause the video and use these numbers because these are all old based on the old seasons. But this will give you a little bit of a taste of what you can expect in the future, along with obviously me explaining them. I'm not just gonna, here's the data, have fun. And like I said earlier, I'll talk about various factors that might change these numbers, that various things that you could explore to either use less time or make these more beneficial. So anyway, that's one of the things that I just wanted to mention and talk about. I hope to see you guys in the coming future. I'm really excited about this series. This is the most passionate part of, that's the wrong way to say that. This is why I love Farming Simulator the most. And this is why I love seasons the most. Because without seasons, this type of analysis is meaningless. It really is. It's do everything as fast as you can, and that gets you the most money. I mean, so it's really always getting the biggest equipment, blowing through fields as fast as you can, and, these numbers are really meaningless. But in the context of seasons, where for you to do something, time in the game is advancing, and it's all about cost-benefit analysis. I mean, that's really the bottom line of what this is, right? And so we're going to be looking at these detailed numbers and figuring out what's the best thing to do. And there might be some surprises along the way, but that's half the fun. Anyway, I will see you guys later. I hope that you're excited about this. I know I am. My voice is disappearing, so I'm going to go before it starts to get much, much worse. I will see you guys later. Thanks again. Bye-bye.